People often say that the United States is going through a period much like the Roman Empire during its years of decline. I think it's pretty clear that America and Rome are very different, and whether you agree or disagree with the idea that America is the new Rome, there are some striking similarities between the issues that Rome was dealing with during the crisis of the 3rd century and America and Western Europe is dealing with today. Printing ridiculous amounts of money to relieve its problems, military tensions on the outskirts of the empire with Russia, Iran, and China all threatening war, and issues at home with dysfunctional monetary and political systems run by corrupt bureaucrats pulling our country apart. This might not be all that surprising though. Most crisis cycles churn out incredibly similar events over time, whether we're talking about the cycles of expansion and militarism to bureaucracy and decadence, or simply the incremental degradation of common sense economics tracked by governments attempting to control the economy. Which of course you can learn all about because you can read books from Amazon to learn about anything you're interested in. Sometimes I have trouble finding books for inspiration, and that's why it's great to have a full library to choose from at Amazon. You can browse through thousands of awesome books on economic history and much more. Learn from great authors about how the world works and all those interesting topics you've been wanting to do a deep dive on. Depending on your preferences, you can pick between Kindle, paperback, hardcover, and Audible. There's a lot of great deals up right now, so scroll down, click the link below, and check out all the great options available. The crisis of the 3rd century is a great example of a government making bad economic decisions and kicking the can down the road for the next generation to deal with, leading to constant unrest, war, and even a few collapses. Rome during the 3rd century was just like many other governments in history, scrambling to hold on to power on its many fronts. It ended up incrementally punishing the people within its borders to maintain the status quo. In a sense, this crisis could really be considered the death of Rome's capitalist system. As the safety of the empire became less compatible with the free economic system, it was gradually replaced with a kind of quasi-authoritarian city-state socialism marked by bureaucracy, economic planning, an emergency barter system, state industry, and social welfare. Rome always had a fairly large social welfare system, especially for the people within the Italian peninsula, and most especially for people living within Rome. Roman citizens had all of their basic needs provided for them through the government, which maintained this system by taxing the outer provinces, as the Roman citizens did not pay taxes. The Empire of Rome had a lot of state-run industries on top of that. However, it also had a very large, prosperous private sector, which included much of the empire-wide trade system, with large industries and guild unions who relied on it. But unfortunately, you can't have an effective free market capitalist system, no matter how large or small it is, without money. And that's what the crisis of the 3rd century is really all about, at least economically. The devaluing of money to a point where it becomes literally worthless junk, all as a way to pay for government debts. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? The crisis of the 3rd century is often said to have started around the 220s AD, but this would not give any love to the problems that likely led up to all of the major issues that crippled the empire. As a matter of fact, the issues started in the 1st century, right after the reign of Emperor Augustus during the Pax Romana. Ever since the reign of Nero between 54 and 68 AD, the empire had been meddling with the value of the silver denarius. The emperors gradually took more silver out of coins to pay for pricey wars, social programs, and public works projects and palaces. It was an easy alternative to increasing taxes, which the aristocracy really didn't like and often caused uprisings. So they would simply take more silver out of the currency or reduce the size of gold coins as a way to tax the Roman people, just as the United States does to its own citizens by printing and devaluing the dollar. There is evidence to suggest that this probably had very little effect on Rome's monetary system in the beginning, because it was mostly backed by gold, and the gold aureus coin was mostly left alone except for a couple reductions in overall weight through the centuries. Also, the devaluations were very slow, happening over many decades and centuries. But silver still had intrinsic value, and just because silver wasn't overtly used as the base currency, people still valued the coins because of its worth in silver. So the face value of coins got less and less attention as the coins themselves became so worthless, and because the denarius and other silver coins were the most common currency in the empire, this debasement did begin to have a major effect, however slow it might have been. It was basically a death timer for the liberal Roman economy gradually ticking away. In the Augustan era of the 1st century, the silver coins started at about a 97% purity. But by the end of the 2nd century, after incremental reductions in silver during the reign of emperors Nero, Trajan, Marcus Aurelius, Commodus, and Severus, the coins had been debased all the way down to a purity of about 56%. I know this might not sound like that big of a deal. Cutting the price of money in half over more than 200 years is honestly super chill compared to what we have today. And it only influenced an inflation rate of about 0.7%. Not so bad if I do say so myself. I mean, since the year 2000, we've cut the US dollar in half multiple times. But you just wait, this is just the beginning for Rome. In around 117 AD, Rome effectively stopped expanding into new areas, and for an empire primarily fueled by the spoils of war, new sources of wealth to increase people's standard of living became harder and harder to find. After many years of restructuring the Roman Empire, the last great emperor of the classical period, Marcus Aurelius, died and his son Commodus took power between 180 and 192 AD. This is often considered the beginning of the end of the Roman Empire. Commodus's reign was marked by brutality, ignorance, and eventually insanity, and it started a centuries-long campaign of appeasing the Roman military and debasing coins to pay for the government's grand projects. This period ended about 84 years of relative peace and prosperity, leading to the immense mismanagement of the empire for over a century to come. By the turn of the 3rd century, Rome's issues became more and more apparent as wars to maintain the borders of the empire, large increases in military spending, social aid, public works projects, and payments to barbarians slowly wore down its income sources. Directly after the rule of Commodus, Emperor Severus and his son Caracalla's reforms in the 190s up to the late 210s AD greatly increased the pay of military recruits to 2,400 sesterces per year to keep the loyalty of the legionaries. Caracalla paid for these increases by raising taxes on the outer provinces and by further reducing the amount of gold, silver, and brass in the Roman coins, including reducing the amount of gold in the Arius to 6.6 grams, the amount of silver in the denarius to about 51%, and the amount of brass in the sestertius to 24.8 grams. Caracalla also invented the silver Antoninianus coin that became the main coin used during the 3rd century, and probably had a face value worth 2 silver denarius. However, it only weighed about 1.5 times as much, so it was really just a further debasement of currency by about 20 or 25%, one of the largest in Roman history up to that time. By Caracalla's reign, inflation had clearly begun to rise, and the prices in the empire had gone up by more than 2.5 times since the reign of Emperor Augustus. Which, again, isn't that crazy considering all of the other issues in the economy, like a massive amount of goods being taken from around the empire to pay for wars, increasing demand and prices, and, of course, the halved value of the denarius and its further debasement by the Antoninianus. Counting all of this together, that amount of inflation is really not that bad. But because inflation often doesn't happen immediately, it's no wonder why Caracalla didn't see the issues caused by the major debasement of the silver coins before his assassination. Later, after a few power grabs for the throne, the teenage emperor Elagabalus also devalued these coins between 218 and 222 AD, reducing the gold in the Arius to about 6.35 grams of gold, the silver in the denarius to about 46%, the silver in the Antoninianus to 43%, and the brass in the sestertius to 22.5 grams. Elagabalus also ordered that all taxes be paid in only gold, which damaged the reputation of Rome's silver coins. That would be like the government refusing to take change when paying for a parking ticket or for your car registration or something. If the government doesn't even want them, why would anyone else trust it? Elagabalus probably did this as a way to avoid more debased silver coins from re-entering the treasury, because that would defeat the entire point of their scheme. After the assassination of Elagabalus in 222 AD, there were 6 emperors who came to power. There was Alexander Severus, who fought a costly war with Persia and paid off a Germanic tribe, which pissed off the military, and he was assassinated in 235. Maximinus, who was also killed by his soldiers in 238. Gordian I and Gordian II reigned together for 3 weeks and both died, one killed in battle and one of suicide. Then Pupienus and Balbinus reigned together for the rest of the year before Gordian III carried out another extremely expensive war with Persia that led to, you guessed it, more coin devaluation. reducing the Aureus to 4.85 grams of gold, the Antoninianus to 4.35 grams overall, and the Berassus Tertius to 20.5 grams. However, it wasn't until Emperor Gallienus that things went from bad to 100% unrecoverable. During his reign, the empire continued to be attacked regularly by barbarians, and there were 15 power grabs from people all over the empire claiming the throne. Rome did not have the cash on hand to deal with any extra problems, and they dealt with it the only way they knew how to at this point. This led to the Aureus becoming half of the size that it was at the beginning of the century, down to 3.4 grams of gold, and the Berassus Tertius about 2/3 down to only 16.9 grams. But this wasn't anywhere close to how bad the silver coins were hit. In the beginning of Gallienus's reign with his father in 253 AD, the Antoninianus was reduced to about 2/3 of its initial mint weight, down to about 3.4 grams with only 36% silver content, and by the end of his reign in 268 it had been reduced to 2.4 grams, less than half of its original weight, and only 2.4% silver. So its actual value was basically nothing at this point. They also devalued the silver denarius, going from about 41% silver to only 6%. Between around 258 and 259, masses of these debased coins flooded the economy, as they were likely used to pay for war debts. Surprisingly, the Roman people were fairly resourceful, and instead of using the continuously devalued coins, many people reverted to a barter system, allowing prices at this time to stay relatively stable at 3 times that of the reign of Augustus, 200 years earlier. Even the government stopped using money to collect taxes, resorting to taking in-kind payments, meaning payments in goods and services rather than money. After the reign of Gallienus, Rome was in complete shambles, with multiple Germanic tribes invading and the entire empire breaking into 3: the Central Roman, the Palmyrene in the east, and the Gallic in the northwest. Between 270 and 274 AD, the new emperor Aurelian was busy reconquering all of Rome, and to do this he put a tremendous amount of strain on the existing Central Empire, forcing them to provide large amounts of food, wine, clothes, leather, and other materials for the war effort, leading to more and more inflation as these goods dried up in the empire, increasing demand many times over on top of the currency devaluation. He was successful in winning the war and reconquering Rome, but he was also attempting to reform the ridiculous mess that the economy and monetary system had become, and this led to a revolt of coin mint workers in Rome that ended in a bloody battle with supposedly 7,000 people being killed. The revolt was likely a result of Aurelius attempting to put the financial official in charge of the Roman mint, Felicissimus, on trial for stealing and allowing workers to steal silver during the coin minting process, leading to the value of coins being depleted far below acceptable levels while the empire was at war. After the revolt and executing Felicissimus, Aurelius instituted monetary reforms that recovered the gold Aureus to its weight of 6.6 grams, and minted a new coin called the Aurelianianus. That is a mouthful. Which was supposed to replace the drastically devalued Antoninianus coin. However, it too only contained about 4 to 5% silver, which really shows how dire the situation was, as this was considered an improvement. He also put maximum price controls on some of the most important goods in the empire, inevitably causing more shortages. He prosecuted corrupt officials, and reformed the Roman dole to include better food for the Roman people, including bread instead of raw grain, as well as salt and pork, and subsidized prices for olive oil and wine, which was undoubtedly very popular with the people of Rome. But likely to save money on his generous food offerings and other radical reforms, he shut down the Alimenta program created by Trajan, a welfare program designed to help orphans throughout Italy with money, food, and education. Diocletian was the last emperor of the 3rd century, who reigned between 284 and 305 AD, and he was also one of the only emperors out of the 25 throughout the entire century not to be brutally assassinated, actually. Diocletian is often known as a kind of savior of Rome, much like Aurelius, because he created a new economic and political system for the 4th century that brought relative stability. However, most of what he did was simply put the nail in the coffin of the once great and very liberal economic system of the Pax Romana. One of the first economic reforms carried out by Diocletian was to restore the quality of the Roman currency, He minted a replacement for the aureus called the solidus at a reduced weight of 4.45 grams, but with over 99% gold, as well as a replacement for the extremely devalued Aurelianianus called the argentius, weighing 3.4 grams with a 92% silver content or above. He also minted multiple copper and bronze coins as well. But with so many decades of debased trash coins circulating in the economy, the situation quickly became a classic example of Gresham's law. Basically, when good quality money is introduced at the same legal face value as bad money that is essentially worthless, the good money tends to disappear from circulation as people hoard it. For example, if the US government started making quarters and dimes out of pure gold and silver, people would never spend them. They would likely just hold on to them or melt them down and sell it on the market for much higher prices than it's legally worth. Diocletian's reforms included massive increases in the size of the military by almost double, an increase in many more public works projects like factories, mints, defenses, roads, baths in Rome, and his own palace. This all required much more taxes and a quadrupling in the bureaucratic class throughout the empire. This increase in bureaucracy was so immense that the amount of public workers began to outnumber the amount of private taxpayers. On top of these increases in taxes and government size, Diocletian also further burdened his people by regularly confiscating silver, creating new war levies, quote-unquote buying metals at set prices much lower than their actual price, and putting surcharges on land. By the end of the 3rd century, the currency devaluation and consistent use of resources for the military led to runaway inflation at about 35% per year, and at some points at over 1,000%, with prices reaching about 70 times more than they had been during the reign of Emperor Augustus. As a result, Diocletian passed some pretty nonsensical economic controls, including his edict on maximum prices in 301 AD, which controlled the price of over 900 goods, 130 types of labor, and the prices to transport many goods. This was all in order to supposedly keep the cost of living down and reduce the insane inflation. However, that's just simply not how it works. You can't just decree that there is less inflation because you're the emperor. And it just led to a large black market and more shortages. In the beginning of the 4th century, the issues continued but subsided with a new world order. With the reawakening of a barter system and payment of taxes in kind, the economy devolved from a money economy to a quote-unquote natural economy, much like the moneyless society that the Russian Commissariat of Finances had yearned for in 1919. As a result of the barter system, the empire was unable to carry out as much long-distance trade and collaboration, leading to the incremental destruction of large specialized industries and craftsmen and merchant guilds who relied on this trans-Mediterranean trade. All of this partly influenced Diocletian to break Rome up into the Tetrarchy, 4 separate districts with 4 leaders, because the effective range of control had become so strained by the system. Also, by nearly destroying the private sector with the barter system and extreme Keynesian-like economic controls, the empire was forced to nationalize many industries, creating state-run organizations to supply its armies, and leading to much less efficiency, as it does in any modern economy that forgoes monetary incentives and freedom for the corruption and regulation so common with government-based production. As a result of so many external threats and a reduction in the spoils of war, the mentality of the emperors of Rome seemed to switch right before the 3rd century to a general understanding that the empire did not exist for the people, but that the people existed for the empire. This is a common change for countries going through a crisis because it becomes very easy to convince people that they need the safety of the government much more than the government needs the acceptance of the people during such tumultuous times. People will often throw their liberties directly in the trash if a politician convinces them that they cannot protect them otherwise. They'll try to convince you by saying, "How can we possibly help you if you are so distrustful of us? How can we possibly protect you if you don't let us take everyone's weapons away? How can we possibly feed the poor if you don't let us tax you more? How can we possibly feed you when you are poor from taxation and inflation because we keep taxing you and printing money?" The debasement of currency and the wars that motivated the emperors to speed up the debasement led to a familiar cycle that we have seen all throughout history. With higher expenditures, the government, with a monopoly on violence, power, and the creation of money, starts to systematically abuse its trust and responsibilities, all to get money to pay for a massive public sector, social welfare, and overall control of the empire. The end result of this path is crippling totalitarian control and bureaucracy. The most powerful class that most people deal with on a regular basis is the bureaucratic class. These people are not usually the richest. That isn't to say money doesn't actually come with power, as it does, but money can't do much of anything without a bureaucrat saying so in this country, partly because bureaucrats are the people who maintain the trust in your currency. Rich people don't have much if money is worthless, and money is only worth something if the government allows it to be. Even if your money is tied up in property and other physical assets, you can't protect those assets without the rule of law. The bureaucrats in Rome who consistently raised taxes and reduced the value of coins were not necessarily always the richest, but they were always the most powerful enough to tear Rome, at the height of its power, into pieces, even if they didn't know what they were doing. Other great examples of this are almost every revolutionary who subjugated their country. Hitler, Nyerere, Lenin, Mao, and Stalin were by no means the richest people in the world, and some of them despised the idea of money completely. They were intellectuals who cared about power and reshaping the world. They were driven by an ideology. The same goes for those who run the Federal Reserve and print money, or labor unions, or any regulatory agency in the United States. These people don't care about becoming the richest people in the world. They want to prove their idealistic beliefs are correct and protect that belief at all costs. Those are the people who we must always be the most skeptical of, because if America is anything like Rome, and we are slipping into a spiral of printing money to pay for debts, bailouts, and social programs, we may well see free markets and private businesses be replaced by totalitarianism and state-run enterprises here as well. Anyways, that's everything. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you like this video, and check out my sources in the description if you'd like, and feel free to help us out with a tip to our Ko-Fi. If you're a creator struggling to make content, check out Danksphere in the link in the description, a production meets marketing company that helps creators turn their stories into content that grows their audience and business. And of course, stay free.